Marhaba and welcome to another episode of Culture Capsule. Today's guest is not just an entrepreneur. He is someone who chose not to just follow innovation, but to revive it. He took a visionary concept once explored by NASA, and he brought it back to life, but this time not to space, but to planet Earth. I'm pleased to welcome Alberto Aguilar, CEO of Plantaform, and his addition, Plantafarm, a leader reshaping the future of agriculture through Fogponics. Alberto, welcome to Culture Capsule.
Thanks for having the show, Samar.
Thank you. It's good to have you. Okay, so it's a beautiful day today in the region, and I'd like to start from the very beginning. So I think you were brought up and raised in Spain. And then after that, you moved to Dubai for your high school. Is that correct? And then from there to Canada for college. And then you started being an entrepreneur. You started business in housing and relocation. And then your big project. Before we talk about your big project, when you were here as a teenager in the UAE, what was the biggest culture shock for you coming to a completely different region?
Well, I've always said that my favorite years of my life has always been in the UAE. It's the fact that there's so many ties and similarities between the Spanish culture and the Middle Eastern culture in general. I think the biggest shock was not necessarily one culture shock, but I think it was more of a globalized, diversified culture shock. Seeing, how it's the first time in my life that I was able to see people from all around the world, friends from all around the world, where we're all on the same boat, and we're all living in our host country, which is the UAE. So I think overall it was. I've always said it, and I cannot wait for my kids to be able to live that this was the best years of my life because they were fun, they were real, it felt like a dream, and it felt like, this is the real world that, beyond the borders of your own country, you can really witness.
So as a TCK, and allow me to explain to our audience what a TCK is. It's a third culture kid, a kid who traveled with his parents and lived his years in a new culture. So he started his own culture because he has his home culture and then the culture of the country that he's living in, and then he started to form his own culture. So as a TCK, were you able to manage to friendship with locals or Arabic-speaking nations? How did you started to belong to the country?
Well, first of all, my best friend is actually Emirati, and I did not meet him in Dubai. I met him in Canada in university, which says a lot, right? You're going to now a different country, and then your best friend ends up being another immigrant in that country who has your former host country nationality. But like I give onto it. I remember the first time I had Mendy. I remember the first time I bought a kandura and wore it, and the way they were making fun of me because I wear it wrongfully. And just the culture is it's beautiful. It's beautiful because it flows in tradition, it flows in hospitality, it's welcoming, it's loving, it's real. And that's why I say that there's so many similarities with the Spanish culture. Hence, we have very back history among both nations and cultures, but there's nothing that I can think of that I did not like about it. The food, the people, the hospitality, and it's incredible. And I think that's why the UAE is such a special nation, where it ties the whole world. It does not judge you by your color. It does not judge you by where you're from. It cohabits, and it provides that cohabiting, atmosphere and environment that allows everyone to thrive and prosper together.
So who nails it better, do you think, going back to the kandura? Do the women wear better the abaya in a matter of fashion and trend and, similarities in clothes, or the men? I mean, women wear it nail better wearing the kandura. The expat women, they wear better the abaya than the men. So the men, because you always see that the men hesitate to wear the kandura, right? We see
Yeah, I think a lot of expat men try to wear the kandura, but they don't feel like they fit on it well.
Yeah.
Women, on the other hand, I mean, my wife has worn an abaya many times in the UAE. It's beautiful. It's a dress, right? So it's a dress. It flows. It's silky. It feels like you're in a Disney movie in a way. So I think it fits really well among, regardless where women are from, and it's well adopted by them. And men, it's just the awkward, how do I fit all of this and wear this in my day to day? So I would say women.
All right. So did you ever imagine that after you'll be returning one day to the UAE when you were 18? Have you ever, usually for expats here that come with their families and then their parents start a business here, they always say, okay, one day you're going to come back and take care of the business. But that was not the case with you. Did you ever imagine when you were leaving to college, because you went to Canada for college, right? Did you ever imagine that you will be coming back one day?
I actually did. I've always told myself I was going to come back to Dubai. As I said, it truly, truly was the happiest years of my life. And when I went to Canada and I settled there, which I love Canada with the bottom of my heart, I've always said I would find a way to come back to the UAE and set roots there and plant my seeds and try to live the best life, which is a life between Spain, between UAE, and between Canada.
That's right. Spain also, if we talk now about Spain, I mean, I've been to Spain before, and honestly, you have amazing taste of fruits and vegetables there. They taste very unique. So I'm going to ask you this because it's a cultural say in different countries. They say, if you manage to grow a crop somewhere, you colonize it. So did you ever manage to go there? Because I don't know what's going on now. You have to help me with that, really, seriously. Farming now for your generation is so much in. I mean, it's just hot. It is trendy. It is sleek. It is. I talk to friends, to my kids, and everybody's there, have a little garden somewhere or doing something. Well, it is becoming something special, something unique. Like when people used to do going to the gym, it is now is the trend that you have either a garden back in your backyard or indoor plants that you're growing. What's going on? Tell me.
I think it's just shifting in the day and age that we're living in. 20 years ago, having a garden was very common among most people, but I think we all took it for granted because, I mean, we're humans, we come from nature, having trees, having vegetables, farms, everything has, it's in our genetics. But as technology has been evolving, I feel like there's been a massive detach with nature. I remember when I was a kid, the Game Boy came out and then the PlayStation came out, and more and more there was a shift where, my older brother or my older sister generation was all about going out and playing out, playing football outside, going to the park, and it was more outdoorsy. And then there was a shift towards, concrete jungles and digitalization of the world and digitalization over entertainment, that it disconnected us with nature. And I feel like now the new norm is, you grow up in concrete jungles where nature's mainly absent. Well, now people crave that touch and that connection with nature again. Hence why, if gardening in certain parts of the world, it's seen as a luxury. It's a luxury to be able to have a backyard and allocate, because especially in a world where real estate is expensive, for example, having land just to grow your own food, it's seen as a luxury. The fact that you can, plant seeds, see them grow, take care of them, you would address it kind of like having a pet and taking care of a pet. But in this case, it's vegetables, so you get to eat, you feel better about it. And overall, it creates this wholesome awareness among people. So I'm very glad to be noticing that, regardless of what part of the world I've been, in Spain, in the UAE, in Canada, during COVID, 51% of Canadians started gardening. That's more than 20 million people that decided, I'm going to go garden because there's nothing else to do. I'm trapped at home and I'm going to do things that I love. And so that connection to nature, it's that missing fulfillment or wholesome part that I feel that most of us are missing. It's in our genetics. Nature is in our genetics.
However, do you think there is mentioning Canada, there is a kind of similarity between the harsh weather in Canada and the harsh weather in the UAE, but we are on the hot side and they are in the cool side, because you have like once a year thing and then everything is snow, it's covered in white. So here I'd like to know, you studied business. So how come from business shifting to agriculture? And this is one question, and I'm just going to weave it with another question, so to enjoy listening about this from you. Explain to me also, how did you decide to, like a 16 years old, okay? Because I don't know, how did you took where NASA left off and decided that, okay, I'm going to work on this? Because this is tough, this is hard, this is something that needs a certain mindset and dedication and hard work and trial and errors. Where did you find the time? How did you do it? So share with us, please.
Agriculture comes from passion. I grew up in a homestead in Spain. We grew all of our vegetables, we grew all of our fruits. It was perennial crops that we would grow, meaning that in the summertime we grow tomatoes, in the wintertime we switch over to pumpkins, things that would be more resilient to the climate in Spain. But year-round we would grow our own food, we would remove our dependency from going to the supermarkets, and that's how I was brought up. So when I moved to Dubai, I've always said Dubai, you have infrastructure, you have education, you have opportunities, you have healthcare, you have absolutely everything that would create the perfect society. Yet the one vulnerable spot that Dubai is addressing continuously and putting it as a top priority is its food security. Because Dubai has harsh climate, which is the arid desert. Just like in Canada, it's the opposite. In the wintertime, you actually cannot grow outdoors for 8 months of the year. So I would say it's as bad as it is in the Middle East, right? So it's just the opposite in that case. In the Middle East, you can grow in the winter, right? Usually the farming season is between October, November, all the way to like February, March. And in Canada, it's the opposite. During that time, from October all the way to like April. Yesterday, it snowed in Canada. And it's April 7th. And it snowed. So like, you cannot grow anything outdoors. So going back to how I jumped into this, I went to university. I did a SaaS company, and then I jumped into building another company that was AI before ChatGPT and all of these things existed. And the company was growing so fast that when COVID started, it unfortunately killed that business. There was no more pipeline. We were doing relocations. So COVID gave me a lot of free time to think. I think it was kind of like that isolation dilemma. We're social animals. So when you're putting humans in isolation, it either brings you to insanity or towards obsession if you don't socialize enough. And for me, I chose the obsession route, and I wanted to build something meaningful this time. I thought to myself, well, where am I in my life right now? What a time to be alive, right? I was 23 years old at the time, living in Canada, world apocalypse, company just went, belly up. And I had the fortune of living in Dubai, coming from Spain, and one of the privileged kids that was able to leave Spain. Wow. Well, let me focus on creating something meaningful this time. And I went back to my passion about growing plants. And that's because the supermarkets in North America were blocked. There was long lineups that you could only buy a certain amount of food. And that was meaning that every person could buy a maximum of 2 lettuces. You can only buy half a kilo of tomatoes. So there was a food shortage. And that was shocking in a place like Canada, where we're the second largest country in the world, with the second largest freshwater reserve in the world. And I found out that, just like the UAE, we import over 90% of our vegetables from the US and Mexico. And the UAE imports over 90% of its food from neighboring countries. Look at that commonality. So food supply chains in the world were disrupted. Food security was a challenge. So I decided to create something meaningful, which was, how do we empower people to be able to have control over their food? There's so many problems with the food supplies nowadays. Food waste, more than 50% of the food from the farm, by the time it gets to our tables, has been wasted. The pesticides, the chemicals, the cancer stuff that goes into what we eat today. You'll never know what you're eating because, it's been 12 hands have touched that vegetable before you put it on your plate. So I wanted to find a way to be able to encourage people to grow their own food at home. But to make it different and better, hence the word innovation before, I wanted to go deep into a new technology, which is when I came across this article from NASA where they were growing plants in space using fog. So I think that's really where it all started. It was that epiphany light bulb moment where I was like, well, that's very interesting. And I wonder why nobody's using that technology here on Earth. But before I rumble on, I hope that answered the question of how the real epiphany and idea came to the big shift towards agriculture.
So as NASA now have something which is the aeroponic, that's what works now with them, and you adopted the Fogponics.
Correct.
So now can we have, is it easy just to order it? So you have now two projects parallel to each other, I assume. You have the capsule. So now from talking about your capsule and my capsule, so Culture Capsule is asking Plantaform capsule, how this capsule can come to my home, and is it enough? Is it enough for a family, or do we get different ones for different crops if needed? And can it be available? Is it easy, or what is the process to get one of those capsules and have it at home to have your own produce?
Well, to start the idea to create this solution, it had to be simplicity. If you want something to be majorly adopted by the world, you need to make it extremely simple. The problem that we were solving is what I mentioned before, the supply chain, the reliance on food importation. So the best way to help someone grow their own food actually started by associating it to Nespresso. Why? Because brewing coffee back in the day was a lot more complicated. Nowadays, you can just grab a capsule, put it into the machine, and brew your cup of coffee within seconds. Well, we adopted the exact same business model where we created soilless capsules with a wide variety of crops that you can grow, from tomatoes, leafy greens, herbs, flowers. You put them into the device, you add some water, and at the push of a button, it'll grow your vegetables year-round, fully automatically. You choose tomatoes, well, you put the capsule in it, and it'll grow tomatoes. And every time you harvest, it'll keep growing back tomatoes. So you know exactly where your food's coming from. You're not wasting anything throughout the process. And you're using 98% less water than any traditional farming out there. So you're really contributing to, protecting the scarce water resources that the Middle East has, for example. So essentially, this technology that we decided to pioneer and focus on for the last 6 years evolved into this indoor gardening machine, an appliance that we mentioned it, to be able to empower thousands of people across the world to be able to grow their own food at home in a simple way like Nespresso. So we have this across Canada, we have this in the US. We've done some pretty big milestones, like selling across big retailers like Costco. We won the 2025 CES Best of Innovation Award, which is the world's biggest innovation award that any hardware company can get. We were on Dragon's Den, which for those is like Shark Tank, but for Canada. So we've done a lot of big milestones, and the adoption has been incredible. And now we're in the UAE, where we've partnered up with so many school boards. We're partnering up with retailers. It's available right now on plantaform.com. It's as simple as ordering it on the website. You receive the indoor garden in your home. You plug it in. You choose the pots that you wish to grow. And just like that, you have your fresh green oasis year round. And, it can grow 15 different vegetables at a time. And as I said, every time you cut it, it'll keep regrowing back over and over and over again. So would it feed a family? Probably not. It all depends on obviously how much you consume. But a lot of people in North America, they have a variety of these indoor gardens. They have one for their salads. You can grow 30 salads in a month. You have the herbs that you will never buy herbs again in your life. I promise you that, because they just grow like crazy. They just keep cutting them, they'll just keep growing back. You have one for the cherry tomatoes. So overall, it's about how self-resilient do you want to be, and how can it contribute more to your day-to-day life and health without depending so much on the supermarket.
So tell me, I've done some homework and I found out that everything about it is recyclable. What about, electricity can be pricey here for expats in the UAE. Does it consume much electricity?
It's actually very low. It's only 60 watts. So if you have a lamp at home that works with one light bulb, it consumes the exact same amount of electricity.
Oh, really? So also because the light inside is very powerful if we don't have the lids. So that is still will not be much of electricity, which is great. So walk me through, how did you move from the capsule to the farms? How can you cover that on a larger scale, outdoors, in the heat of different countries? And is it for any country? I mean, can you do this anywhere in the world?
You can do it anywhere. This has been an obsession as well that was developed more in 2024. When we had demands from the United Nations, from investors in Africa, specifically from Burundi, Rwanda. We've had inquiries from so many farmers on how to leverage this technology to grow it in a large scale. The solution is a combination of both. People have to be part of the solution by growing their own food at home, but in the large scale schemes, the large supply chains have to be the part of the solution as well. So our objective was, how do we scale this technology to be able to truly feed the world of the future, using less water, growing much faster, and of course, providing more nutritious produce. So there's a lot of R&D. I spent a year traveling around different vertical farms in the Netherlands, in Germany, Spain, Arizona. I was, Montreal. I was going to so many different places to understand the different conditions of climate and how their farming solutions were done. And we initially were leaning towards vertical farming, which we've all heard of vertical farming to be, the very sexy style of farming, because, it's very technological. It can grow a lot of food. So we were leaning towards that. But after finding out, the P&Ls of every one of these farms around the world, I noticed that nobody was making money. So what a shock that this, tens of millions of dollars invested in a vertical farm with some incredible technology was not making money. So it kind of like pushed us back to rethink, why is it that we cannot feed the demand of the population in an affordable way and in a profitable way for the farmer? Because if we want to feed the people, the first person that needs to make profit is the farmer, or else nobody else will do it. So after studying all of the farms that we visited, we noticed there's only one type of farm that has existed for centuries and it's still working. And those are greenhouses. You don't need to go vertical. Vertical is a solution for places where you don't have arable land. It's a solution for the Netherlands, which are, they're the big pioneers in agriculture and vertical farms. Maybe places like Singapore, where there are islands. But it unfortunately was not seen as the correct approach. Innovation does not necessarily need to mean automation. Innovation needs to come about the resources that requires to grow food, right? It's the most in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Food production is the number one thing for survival, and we're complicating it too much with technology and making it too expensive that we're giving razor thin blade profit margins to the farmer, which becomes discouraging for them to want to take that risk.
Correct.
So greenhouses have worked, and now if greenhouses have worked for so long and they're still working, how do we allow them to become more profitable and at the same time grow more food per square meter? And that's how we design our farms.
Exactly.
So we kind of made them vertical, but instead of having them fully vertical, which, it's vertical farming, we kind of made it like from a two-dimensional design. So for example, hydroponic farms, they grow flat and they just grow like that. So instead, we fold them into pyramid A-frames. So for the same space that you would grow in a flat surface, you're now getting double the production because they're designed like this. And since the sun goes from both sides of the A-frame, you'll still get sunlight in both sides of the frame, allowing plants to grow. And of course, the irrigation system, which is where we are the pioneers in, is Fogponics. We use 50% less water than hydroponics and grow plants 30 to 40% faster. What else is more important than that productivity formula? And we're not making it complex. We're not replacing human labor for robotics. That is not the solution, right? The solution is use less resources, allow the farmer to make profit, make it, CapEx accessible, and and make it as fast as possible for the farmer to break even. And if the farmer makes money, trust me, he'll want to expand. He'll want to feed the whole population.
Absolutely. And especially during this time of uncertainty, what do you say to the UAE for this type of agriculture? It will give us a lot of self-sufficient, and bring more security to the country. So taking you back about the 98%, does the type of water matters? I mean, here in the UAE, we have hard water. So have you also can you walk me through if the type of water is different? Would it matter to the crop, less iron, less mineral, all these details?
Of course, the type of water is everything, right? Desalinated water, you mentioned, is hard. But in farming, you have reverse osmosis systems, which essentially softens up the water, breaks it down into more of the right fluidity for the plants to be able to absorb it effectively. So reverse osmosis tanks have existed as well for a very long time. It just depends how strong you want the reverse osmosis to be to filter out the water and make it as clean as possible for the plants to consume. So that process is done in hydroponics and is done with Fogponics. It's just how you deliver that water and nutrients directly to the plant. So that's really how we make things different. Instead of submerging the roots into the water, we vaporize the water and feed it directly into the hanging roots. So we give it the exact amount of water that it needs. It absorbs way more because of that process, and it provides better oxygenation. So it's a whole different formula that's been incredible to push the boundaries of agriculture. You have to think, right? If NASA created this to grow plants in space and the UAE have a lot of things in common. And it starts with not having a lot of water. And you got to recycle whatever water you have in your space stations. So every droplet counts. And that's exactly what we stand for. We make every droplet count, and we maximize the square meter of usage to be able to grow that food, with obviously the motto of the farmer always comes first.
So if you look at our Emirati desert, people see limitation. What do you see for the future?
Number one is the heat. Anything at 50 degrees plus Celsius will kill anything alive. You have the water. Most of the water in the UAE is desalinated, and 87% of the fresh water in the Middle East is actually used in agriculture. So, it kind of puts the nation into a very vulnerable position. If you can turn that and make it more efficient and preserve that water dependency for agriculture, then you're strengthening the food independence of the country. But at the same time, in terms of the heat, in Canada, you can grow in the wintertime. It just needs to mean that you need more heaters in the farm. You need to control the environment a lot better. Vice versa. In the summertime, you can create a better controlled environment. It is more expensive to cool it down. But there's a lot of new technologies that are coming up, for example, which are like membranes that you put on top of the greenhouse that block the heat radiation that comes inside from the sun, which allows the greenhouse to actually be cooler than the exterior. So this is the kind of innovation that actually solves the real problem. But the world has been shifting more towards automation because they see human error as the flaw, or human labor as the expensive part of things. And now AI is a very hot topic, and AI has been replacing so many jobs in the world. Agriculture is the one industry that's not going to get affected by AI, because you will always need your hands and your eyes to go and harvest and take care of the plants. So I believe that we've been going toward the right direction in terms of just focusing all about the resource efficiency on how to grow food.
So you brought it up, so I'm going to ask. It seems that there is not one episode of this podcast without a question about AI is a must. We have to put a question about AI. We say that AI is taking over. So if we want to give insights about the new generation that are looking for jobs, what would you tell them to do regarding AI taking over, and where they can look to find jobs? Because sometimes you find, I'm not going to take a degree or an MBA and then work as a farmer at the end. I cannot do that. This is, by the way, a very typical culture thing here in the Middle East. People send their kids to reputable universities overseas, and then they say, oh, my son or my daughter is going to work as a farmer. What kind of job is that? I didn't spend all that sort of money so she can work in farming at the end. So can you please change the concept or the image here and explain what is going on in this field nowadays?
Well, AI is replacing jobs everywhere. And I think 90% of the jobs in the world right now are threatened by AI. Oracle laid off 30,000 employees last week. The first week that Claude Cowork came out, 45,000 employees in the US got fired. It's inevitable. AI is going to be part of our lives. It's inevitably. It's a new generation. It's a new, it's like the next level of the .com era. And we have to adapt to it. But, it might be a little bit of a biased answer, but, I've never had a job, or at least a normal job. I've always gone the entrepreneurial route. But, the one thing I really stand for in life is I'm very happy the route I took because I love I love doing what I do. And my parents were against it. My parents were against me not finishing, my degree, or they were against me not following, a proper international business job that fell under the big three. I always went my own route, and you have to leverage AI. And something that I always tell my own employees is that you're not competing against AI. You're competing, like, for example, the VP of marketing, you're not competing against AI. You're competing against the other VP of marketing who is using AI. So you have to adopt it. If you want to be a doctor, then be a doctor and leverage AI. You want to be a farmer, then be a farmer, but leverage AI. AI is not going to substitute the farming activities. It's going to allow you to process faster and test faster and overall be more efficient. So it's unfortunate in a way because it seems like we're also going to be dependent on it. But for anyone, any future graduates or anyone looking for jobs right now, if I was in those shoes where I'm looking for a job and I'm not committed to do anything right now, it's to become more literate on AI and understanding how it can help me in my day-to-day and help me with my career and help me on the things I love. So it's an adoption period.
Right. And there is no shame. I mean, farming is a good job, and it's going to take you places and you can benefit from it. It's just you don't need to go to an office every day and sit there to prove that you are very well educated.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And when you're a farmer, you're not the typical farmer with his straw hat on and the whole out there picking up tomatoes and potatoes. No, being the farmer nowadays is like an entrepreneur. You have land. Yeah. You're getting the infrastructure. You're getting investments to cover their capex. You're bringing employees that you got to train them how to operate in the farm. And then you're finding buyers and negotiating pricing to make a business out of it. So no, I think the perception of farming is very distorted because we're thinking of it how it was 20, 30, 40 years ago, which was, the countryside and, or back, in the Bedouin era and when people were more in the desert. No, farming it's a lucrative business that makes way more money than most, careers out there. And it turns you into a real entrepreneur because you're creating a good and you're selling that good and you're finding it more efficient to increase profits and scale your production. And that's why, I find it very lucrative. How many AI companies are there out there? Tons. Every day there's a new AI solution coming out there. SaaS, when software was a thing, there's so many of those out there. Consulting, all of these careers, there's so many out there, but there's something fulfilling about farming that not only is it lucrative in terms of profitability, but it feels pretty good when you're feeding the people out there. You're really contributing to your society. And I think that's the fulfilling part that a lot of people miss in their careers, that they're doing it for someone else and they're necessarily doing it for something that can benefit the world.
Well said, Alberto. Thank you very much. And it's good to have you back in the UAE. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for hosting me back in the UAE. Honestly, I've always dreamed about that, and I'm happy that I'm back in the nation.
Good to have you back again.
Thank you, Samar.
Thank you.